Hello, and welcome to another fully live Q&A episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinzie. I am here live to answer your questions. I'm a security researcher at Varonis, and today I'm here to talk about some cool and interesting projects I've been working on, some upcoming conferences, and of course, to answer your questions in the live chat. Been a little bit. I was on PTO last week, had some well-deserved rest, and excited to be back. Also, wishing everyone a happy Thanksgiving. I am headed to Los Angeles on a flight that is 6 hours delayed now to spend some time with friends there. So hopefully if anybody on the show is in Los Angeles, I'm going to be organizing a meetup on Sunday at Null Space Labs. So hopefully I will see some of you over the weekend. All right, so lots to talk about today. Also got some people already in the chat and already some questions that have been posed. So best believe I will get to those. But first, I want to show off something that I created this week. So I've been talking about exotic materials and how you can use some of these new 3D printers to print in like multi-material and other things that used to be impossible. It was something that wasn't really able to be done before. So we were talking about how easily you could print in multi-materials, but also there's another type of kind of material hack that's come out. I first saw this at the Layer 1 conference. Their badge was actually a fidget spinner, which was ingenious. And I noticed that on the 3D printed component, there was actually a little bit of a hologram there. So if you follow 3D printing, you probably know where I'm going with this. But there are actually some 3D printed plates available. And I think I'll pull one up just to show off what they look like. And these are very new. Like I hadn't really seen these being offered before this year. And sorry, I'm running the show today. Here we go. These effect prints plates allow you to apply basically either textures or nano textures to your print. So like macro textures, like carbon fiber and stuff like that. Like that's one thing I've heard of that. That's not super crazy or revolutionary, but the holographic stuff like this, now that is something really special and really cool. So this is again relatively new, and the way this works is through like creating a transfer of a nanoscale pattern that creates this hologram. So this is like an actual hologram. It's very glowy. It's very cool. It has a 3D effect to it. And this will work for upwards of 200 prints. And you don't need special plastic. I've just been using ESUN PLA Plus for a lot of the prints I've been doing. But the ability to make these super beautiful holographic sheets from just regular plastic is really incredible. So if you haven't seen this, I am pretty enchanted by this. I think it looks absolutely cool. And I was like, okay, what do I want to make out of this? I got a bunch of these sheets last week, and I decided to make a project that involves this kind of holographic display. And already I created QR codes that are like a business card kind of thing where I'm handing this out, and I'm hoping that people will then scan it. I think I got a video. Let's see. Here we go. Yeah. So originally, I made a couple of these QR codes where the back is holographic. You can see the effect there. And then the front is glow in the dark. So it's actually a QR code. It goes to my website or just, my little place that has all my content on it. So I thought that was pretty cool. So I wanted to make something that was a little bit more showy than just kind of this here. So we have a cat who makes this face, and this is the face. And I really like this face. He kind of looks like he's just absolutely awestruck by whatever he's looking at. He does this face a lot, and I wanted to see if I could simplify it into something that I could 3D print into a sign that's kind of like lit up, glow in the dark, and also holographic. So I turned to DALL-E, which created this, and I was like, you know what? He doesn't really have the eye markings there, but it's close enough. This is the face where the cat is like so surprised it can't believe what's happening to it. And I worked with Inkscape to export this into an SVG file. Here we go. And converted this from what DALL-E gave me into something that I could actually 3D print. So I worked with this a little further. I exported it. I brought it into Bamboo Slicer, which, oh, yes, it's on my other thing right here. And Bamboo gave me the ability to basically divide this up into like glowing segments and make something that looks really cool. So I have the result here. I'm going to switch back to the main camera and see if I can get the like glowy effect to work. Disable this. All right. So this is the result. I think it came out really well. And if I get the right angle, you should be able to see it's very holographic. It glows, it glitters. It's like very, very cool looking. So then also on top of that, it does in fact light up. And what I'm going to do just to show off how it actually looks is try to turn off the main light. Let's see. There we go. I think that came out pretty good. So this is the result of working with multi-material, holographic, 3D printed stuff. The ability to create something like this printer that costs just a little bit is, in my opinion, really cool. And that holographic sheen, that holographic effect, you have to catch it just in the right light, but it really looks incredibly cool. And this, again, this process hasn't really been available before. So if you are a 3D printing nerd, you should note that the mini version of the Bamboo printer that made this is like $200. Of course, you add the filament management system and whatnot, the price goes up a little bit, but there's a Black Friday sale on it. I'm not getting paid anything by it. I'm just saying the ability to make something like this just to, you know, memorialize this face that my cat makes is pretty cool. Obviously, there's implications for this. Being able to make like high quality things that look like they have seals on them looks a lot more official. You can expect to see hackers using this technique for all sorts of stuff. So one thing I'll say is let's talk durability. Because this is a nanoscale pattern and it is just like anything else able to be like rubbed off or like otherwise transferred, you will find that anything that like is rubbing against things or being touched will get filled in with oil, it'll get filled in with debris, or it'll kind of get sanded down. So especially soft plastic will definitely start to degrade over time. I would say though, like I'm really delighted with the ability to use some of these newer printers that switch between filaments to do multi-material, like through and through prints that have like glowing filament versus like holographic effects. Really, it's a lot to work with. So if you're a maker or if you're a hacker that's looking for some flair to add to their project, again, these are like $200 printers that are able to do these sorts of effects. And that really is revolutionary. I think it opens up a lot of possibilities for anybody who's working on these cool maker style projects. So that was something I wanted to share kind of from Hackaday SuperCon. I saw some of this technique being done. I wanted to try it myself. And if you want to try it too, I have to say it does work really well. And I haven't really noticed any compromises when it comes to using this technique versus using a traditional plates. All right, so that is the story of the cat's face and how I have been experimenting with this. Let's move on to one other thing before we get to the general Q&A. Actually, no, probably two other things. Sorry, probably two other things. One of them is if you follow me on Twitter, you may have noticed that I have decided to set that account to be dormant. I no longer will be posting to Twitter, X now. Just because I don't want to. Like every time I open it, I get bombarded with ads I don't want, and it's just not something you really want to feed into. So a lot of people know me from the Nullbyte channel, and I always say like, you know, follow me on Twitter and like tell me what I should make an episode on. And in spite of that, people just ask me like cryptocurrency related questions and like other things like that. So yeah, I check the forbidden DMs every once in a while, and there are some great questions there and some great collaborations and stuff that's sprung from that. But a lot of the time it's just conspiracy theories and stuff. So I don't really mind just kind of either syndicating my stuff on Twitter or kind of like putting it out there that instead I'm going to be on Blue Sky. And I've already been on Mastodon for quite some time. So if you want to find me on social media, that is where you can do it. Just wanted to say this is actually my profile. It is not an imposter. And you'll notice that I'm doing more of my glowing whatever stuff here. So if you want to see more content, you can find me in Blue Sky. You can also find me on both LinkedIn and Mastodon. Okay, cool. So let's see. What else do we have to talk about today? So I had some questions that I will address, but I wanted to also talk about a new design that I'm working on. Hooray. So we talked about hardware design last time. I went, well, not last time, several times in advance to the conference where I made my SAO. We talked about these designs, how they're made, and kind of like what the process is. And I have had a talk approved at this upcoming C3 conference to kind of go over Meshtastic, like how to get started with it, like the best way to use it, and what my experience has been trying to like scale it, and then also being part of communities like SoCal MeshNet. So in order to get people engaged with this, I wanted to create a really, really simple, low cost self-solderable workshop kind of Meshtastic node. And I've created Meshtastic nodes using this little RP2040 chip in combination with this little radio right here. And it works. It crashes every once in a while, but the point of it is it's like $5 to make. So it's really, really cheap. And even though it's not flat on one side, so you have to have this weird kind of cutout in any board that you make for it, you're able to use the RP2040 to do a number of things. And this is the Raspberry Pi Pico chip that is basically running the show here. This form factor is called like the Zero form factor, and it's made by Waveshare, I believe. And it is a pretty convenient way of getting access to the RP2040 chip or the ESP32S3 for an extremely affordable cost. So I have seen some stuff out there like this Heltec wireless stick that is a pretty straightforward Meshtastic board. It literally just has the ESP32S3, ESP32S3 plus a LoRa radio, and this is a slightly nicer LoRa radio, plus an antenna, plus the spaces to put additional antenna, and then we've got a battery management circuit, and that's it. That's all this does. Like there's nothing else here. This is an aggressive price point. I tried buying a bunch of these also for this price point, and I ended up like, they only sent me 1 out of the 5 that I got. So while it says you can get these for that price, I don't know how many other people have had the same experience of not actually being able to get as many as you want. But I wanted to create some kind of like this, like a very basic board that is simple enough to be useful for people who are just getting started and maybe doesn't have all the bells and whistles, so we can keep the price down to something that everybody can afford. So, of course, mere weeks before the conference, I have started designing this very simple circuit board, which has on the back side of it this LoRa radio, and then on the front side, either one of these 2 boards. You can use the RP2040 or you can use the ESP32S3 if you want to have Bluetooth. This one does not have Bluetooth, but you can connect over serial. So this is also actually designed to be 20 millimeters. So that means it should be able to fit inside of a 3/4 inch pipe. And that is in European terms, some European measurement. I forgot. Oh yeah, a 20 millimeter pipe, basically. So I designed like a chunkier version that's a 1 inch pipe version. But I think, and I also created a cardboard cutout to actually fit it inside one of these pipes, make sure I could add pin headers and other things if I wanted to. I think this design is really cool. I'm excited. So if you're going to be going to the C3 conference, I am hopefully going to be not only doing a talk on this and several workshops, but also collaborating with like the off-grid networking assembly and hopefully getting them to work together on something really cool, like maybe having these hardware devices available for anybody who wants to get started with Meshtastic and wants to join one of these off-grid networks at the conference. So really excited to be creating. Oh yes, thank you for noticing the the pause. Thank you for noticing the details here. I am not much of an artist. I just want to make this as cute and useful as possible, but also a couple of mounting holes to make it so you can put this inside a case really easily, or have it like sitting inside of a section of PVC pipe if you wanted to make this an outdoor Meshtastic node for your area as like a router or something. I really wanted to make this something that was simple but powerful enough to turn into like a distributed like sensor or something like that, and also have a battery. So I'm not going to be able to bring batteries to the conference. It's very complicated to ship these, but I will be doing as a stretch goal a version of these that has like a battery connector. That is my hope. That is what I want to do for C3. I have lots of other things that I know I will be doing, but this is kind of the stretch goal. So if you followed along with me on creating the SAO that I attempted to have made for the last conference, then you'll know the process of kind of like going through KiCad, like setting up the board, adding components. And fortunately for this also, most of the components here are already existing in KiCad, so it's not going to be as complicated a process as the last one was. But yeah, I'm really excited to work on this. So far, I'm calling it the Nibble to distinguish it from the Nugget. It's smaller, more simple. But I really like this new form factor of the RP2040 and the ESP32S30. I think they're handy, and then overall, they're probably going to make it easier to start using these boards for things like teaching people Meshtastic. So yeah, a lot of exciting stuff coming up, especially for these conferences. I'm going to be not very much looking forward to the incredibly long flight to Europe, but I certainly am excited to get there and teach everyone via these workshops. All right, so turning to the chat, I've got even more stuff to talk about, everyone, but I want to make sure that everyone gets their questions answered. James, also, hello, James. Love PVC pipes for cheap, sturdy enclosures. I made an adapter for my telescopic flagpole to make testing easy. Yeah, so previously I had this 3D printed design where you could put like a specific type of like Heltec V3 Meshtastic node into it. It kind of looked like a vacuum cleaner like nozzle attachment, but it went on the top of a pipe, and it was really, really easy to like seal up. And I thought that was really cool. So if I wanted to create like a kit or something for people to potentially be putting outdoors, I wanted to make sure that it would be possible to put inside an enclosure that everybody has access to. And fortunately, it seems like we all use the same size plumbing pipes, roughly. So yeah, that's the idea, is that if it clipped into a little 3D printed enclosure or even just fit inside a pipe, it would be able to stay in there and offer an outdoor enclosure that's weather resistant and lets you run one of these little suckers as a off-grid router for your entire area. So the theme of this year's C3 conference is illegal instructions. And with a lot of people looking at ways to avoid censorship or otherwise kind of, be able to maybe, I don't know, like attend protests or otherwise deal with situations where they might not have access to the internet or a cell phone signal, these sorts of off-grid networks are going to be, I think, really useful and exciting for people that are just learning about them. So hopefully we'll get a lot of people introduced to these new off-grid networking systems. And I don't know, I think that the fact they can be made for so cheap is pretty incredible. $5 is a pretty low price point for the version that just has the RP2040, but that's what we're going for. So at least that's what it should cost us in parts and manufacturing to produce them. I don't know how much we'll actually sell them for, and I don't know how much rush shipping is going to cost, which is probably going to double the price. We'll see. But theoretically, anyway, being able to throw together one of these for like $5 is incredibly cool. And I think the pipe enclosure is like a sneaky and nice way of doing it. Let's see. All right, so speaking of mesh, I went and bought the RFM 96 433 feather. He must be in Europe or somewhere not the United States, I think. And an ESP 8266 feather. Where can I find some code libraries to get started? So I found that Adafruit has decent libraries for the RFM 96. You're saying the RFM 69, which there is like an older version of the LoRa radios that I think it doesn't support Meshtastic, but it does allow you to just send raw packets. I found that CircuitPython actually was excellent at this for the most part. I think that there was like some weird value that was being added to the end of my like packets or something that was causing a little bit of strangeness. But aside from that, like it seemed to work pretty well. The Arduino library worked flawlessly. So I would say if you just refer to the official Adafruit Arduino library, that is working per my last test, like perfectly to just send raw packets and be able to create your own protocols if you want to. And then if you instead want to work with CircuitPython, it mostly works. But I found that there were still some issues with the way it was like appending things to packets. And there were some things that I wasn't able to completely track down that were causing me a little bit of stress. So anyway, like CircuitPython's easier to work with for sure, but there might be some underlying issues you can't quite fix because a lot of it is abstracted. But working with raw LoRa packets, there we go, is certainly fun. You can do all sorts of very direct things with it. You can create your own packets. You can also specify a lot of the radio settings. Oh, I remember what it was. Yeah, so if you in CircuitPython attempt to change any of the radio settings, like the encoding settings, it just will not work. I don't know why that is, but it is a pretty significant setback because it means that you can't take advantage of some of the interesting properties of LoRa that allow you to get really tremendous like signal range. So yes, I would say the Arduino library, from my experience, works and is a little bit harder to work with, but it actually works 100%. Whereas the CircuitPython library has a pretty serious bug in it that I found was very frustrating to work with. So I would steer you towards the Arduino library, having spent hours in both libraries writing sample code and working with basically the same hardware setup. All right. Let's see. So one question also from right before the show was from the Discord server. Yes, here we go. So the question here was about four-way handshakes. And I'm not totally surprised that they weren't able to get a great answer. So I looked it up right before the show. And the question here is like, what is a four-way handshake and how do hackers crack it? So I found a couple different explanations of what a four-way handshake is, and some of them are just so baffling that I wanted to just show like what, if you're trying to find out what a four-way handshake is, like this is like an okay explanation. I don't know why we need a meme here. But then we've got this like mysterious pyramid, and then we've got like this kind of graphic, and like like this to me anyway like doesn't really explain it super well. So I wanted to explain it just from like me, a hacker's perspective, in more of like an abstracted way. There's somebody asking how four-way handshake cracking work, and this is actually the response here. I think is like it's somewhat technical, but it's also pretty accurate. And then we have a breakdown of exactly what the components of a four-way handshake are. So what are we even talking about here? So when a hacker wants to break into a Wi-Fi network, let's say they want your password, and you set a bad password because you're lazy, or you reuse the password from somewhere else. So as a result, you have a password that is crackable, it is vulnerable, and a hacker is going to get into your network. So how does that happen? Well, first, I can, as a hacker on the outside of your network, kick a device off of your network and wait for it to rejoin, or I can just, wait until you come home and like your cell phone connects to the network. When that happens, your device will send over a hashed version of the password. Now, if you know the difference between encrypting and hashing, a hash is basically a one-way function that creates a unique number depending on what you put in. So if you put in the same number on both sides, you should get the same result, and it's always the same, and it should be like very identifiable. And then if a single bit of information is changed on either side, it totally changes the hash. That's how we like validate software downloads. Basically, we say, okay, if we take this file and we run all the bits of it through the hash function, and we get this number that we also see on the website, that says this is the hash for the download, then we know that the download hasn't been interfered with. That's like a pretty standard way of using a hash. So anyway, the way that this works is when a Wi-Fi device wants to join a Wi-Fi network, it will send over an encrypted version, a hashed version, important distinction, of the password. And if the hacker wants to, they can use the information that has already been exchanged in that conversation of authenticating and attempting to connect to the network to generate a big, long list of hashes based on password guesses. Now, like this process is like pretty detailed. We have the authentication process where like the device declares its intention to join the network. We have the first anons where it starts sending over a hashed version of the password. And then we have like this back and forth here. But really what you need to know is that if you are the hacker, you're able to grab a hashed version of the password that is combined with like the Wi-Fi network name and a couple other pieces of information that are completely available. They're there for you to grab because they're being broadcasted by the network. So it's like the network name and then like one other thing are combined together, and this is all mashed together through the hashing function. So if you just take like the network name, the password guess, and then run it through this hashing function, and you do that very, very quickly using your computer's processing power, you can eventually find the number that matches, the hash that matches what was sent over by the Wi-Fi device that's trying to connect to the network. So as soon as you find a match, it means that you've found the password, because whatever you put into that hash to get that number that's matching, whatever the client device sent over while trying to connect to the network, that was the correct result. That was the password that actually needs to be added to the hash function to get that magic number. So that is how that works. Hopefully I've described it at least as well as these extremely technical / slightly argumentative people answering this question. Again, high level, when a device connects to a Wi-Fi network and it's a WPA2 network, which is not the most modern encryption. We have WPA3 now, but it's still the most common out there. When a device connects, it sends over a hashed version of the password. And if the hacker is able to successfully guess that password, they will be able to validate it by putting it through the same function and getting the exact same number that was sent over by the client device. So if both of those numbers match, then you have successfully guessed the Wi-Fi password. Now, there's a way of basically validating this. Like there's a further packets through here that allow you to make sure that you have the correct password, because there's actually an interesting exception to this, and I want to talk about that because it's fun. So an exception to this is called a half handshake. So let's say that I am a Wi-Fi hacker and I am creating a fake network that looks just like your office network or your home network. And let's say you have a really crappy home like Wi-Fi password, like password 123. So I create a fake Wi-Fi network that has the same Wi-Fi name as your home network, your device will be like, oh, I see I'm at home. I see it's time to connect to the home network, and it will send over a hashed version of that password. Now, as a hacker, I can intercept that and I can crack it in the exact same way, and I can guess that password. But because it's a half handshake and basically only one side of the conversation is actually there, me as the attacker, I don't know what your home Wi-Fi password is yet, at least when I'm popping up the fake network. So I can only get your device to attempt to connect. I can't respond with anything convincing, because as soon as I respond, the jig is up, and your device will figure out that I'm not actually your home access point because I have no idea what the password is. So in a circumstance where you only get half of that four-way handshake, you only get 2 messages instead of 4, you can still crack the password, but you just don't know if it's validated because you're not able to compare it against the rest of the traffic. So for example, if I attempted to connect to a Wi-Fi network with the wrong password, the hacker could be like listening in on that, see me attempt to authenticate with the wrong password, and think that they successfully cracked this password, when in fact I'm just typing in gibberish. So it's a little, that's kind of like a more complicated case. The half handshake thing, though, I think is really cool because it means you can get devices in public places to give up like a hashed version of like their home Wi-Fi network or something like that. And I think that is pretty crazy. So interesting attack that's based on this four-way handshake, but it again isn't validated, which means if somebody just is attempting to connect to a network with a random password, you could spend a bunch of time attempting to crack that random password and still have it just be basically someone guessing or someone attempting to connect to a network that they don't really know the password to. So all right, kind of a long-winded response to that, but I love Wi-Fi hacking questions. In particular, like I think the half handshake thing and the four-way handshake is a pretty fundamental like Wi-Fi hacking process that like people should at least understand the abstract version of. So yes, that is how a bad Wi-Fi password can get you in trouble. A hacker with a computer, especially nowadays, you can spin up like an AWS instance that is able to be powerful enough to just grind through all of those password guesses. And yeah, it's a lot. It's definitely something that if you don't take care of, you will potentially get into trouble. Now, my biggest recommendation for dealing with that is definitely going to be switching to WPA3. WPA3 protects you even if you set a pretty bad password. It's much more difficult to brute force. So most devices will support WPA3 nowadays, but a lot of IoT devices won't. And the problem is, if someone's trying to break into your network, they're probably just going to do a downgrade attack. So let's say that you select WPA3 as your primary encryption method. If I just pretend to be an older device that doesn't support WPA3, your router will usually downgrade for me and basically allow me to connect with an older authentication protocol that can be abused. So upgrade to WPA3, but it's not bulletproof. You still need to set a powerful and strong password, because if a hacker is able to do a downgrade attack, they could be able to take advantage of all the old attacks that work against WPA2 by just pretending to be a device that doesn't support the newer standard. All right, that's a lot. So hopefully I answered the question and more in the Discord. I do listen and I appreciate you asking on the show. All right, checking in on the rest of the chat. So I would actually be a little bit surprised if the Raspberry Pi, the newer Raspberry Pi anyway, built-in Wi-Fi didn't support WPA3. It's like most things do nowadays. So I think the newer ones definitely do, but I've been surprised and disappointed before by the Raspberry Pi's wireless chipset multiple times. So if that were to happen again, I would not be surprised. All right. Yeah, you're welcome. I hope I actually did simplify that enough that it's understandable, because it was one of the more confusing things for me when I was first getting started with cybersecurity, was like learning about these Wi-Fi attacks. It seemed simple when I was doing them, but then when I tried to look up what was working, I realized like how little I knew about networking. So I took like a single networking class and really learned a lot from that about the way that these things work and like how all of that actually happens in the background and how to use like Wireshark to capture this stuff. So if you're just getting started, do not worry about it. It is not that difficult, but there's a couple pretty simple concepts you can understand to get better at it relatively quickly. All right, so we have a couple questions. Oh, wait. Do I think an APT could hack our fuel pumps? That's an interesting question. So fuel pumps are effectively POS systems, in my view. Like, looking looking at things like watchdogs, where I'm like trying to figure out like what I could disrupt, or like how things are connected. Pumps are POS systems. They're payment systems that are accepting payments and then dispersing measured amounts of gas. They rely on servers and databases that keep track of both like payment status and also of, what is going on at the pump. Is it safe to dispense fuel? Like, I think that a lot of these things probably get automatic updates. Surely they are going through like a gateway or something else that could be attacked, have a denial of service or something where it makes it so you are unable to pay for gas, except like possibly maybe by cash. And even then, it might be possible to actually push an update that made it so certain pumps could not operate. Now, older school technology will still be able to power through that. You could pay like cash for gas and then still be able to pump it with the manual system. But if you had automated pumps that relied on a POS system that was vulnerable, then yeah, I do think that if you targeted a handful of payment gateways that were specifically used by like these gas companies, you could probably disable the automatic payment systems on a number of these pumps and possibly even make it so that they weren't able to disperse gas. That would be a problem, right? Especially during the holidays where there's all this travel, or at least there's supposed to be. It definitely seems like any sort of action like that could make it very difficult for people to move around and would be a pretty serious thing. And yeah, I do think that being essentially payment gateways, like a lot of these infrastructure pieces would be vulnerable to just taking out the ability to pay for these services. Push an update or change prices. Yeah, that's another thing I didn't even think about. If you're able to get access to the actual operating system that's running on them, being able to push an update to them that disrupts them, locks them, or even just the underlying like image or whatever they're using to boot up and like, get all the services they need to run. Like if you were able to corrupt that or damage it, that would really cause a pretty serious situation. So I didn't really think of gas pumps as part of the critical infrastructure that could be hit. Typically, gas pumps are hit by like techno criminals that are doing card skimming or other things at those point of sale systems. Because they accept money, they're like an ATM. They're gonna they're going to attract like local criminals who want to try to like figure out how to skim cards or do other things to make some sort of profit off of them, whether that's replacing QR codes with malicious ones or something else. But yeah, the actual ransoming of the gas pump itself, that would be something entirely new. I haven't seen it before, but that doesn't mean that it could not happen. All right, I'm satisfied with the answers. All right, cool. I'm glad about that. All right. Does anybody use Metasploit anymore? Yeah. So the thing about Metasploit is it's mostly useful for people that are doing like red teaming or pen testing. So it's like, do people use Wireshark anymore? Yeah. Like if you're doing networking stuff, I'm sure you use Wireshark all the time. But when it comes to like pen testing, like I don't do a lot of pen testing, and a lot of Wireshark is not Wireshark, a lot of Metasploit is making it really easy for people who are simulating, an adversary to like grab one of the most recent public exploits and try it on their own network in a controlled fashion in the way an adversary would do and see exactly how their organization responds. So like places like Rapid7, for example, like they, who are the people behind Metasploit, they are very involved in making sure that red teams have the right tooling to accurately simulate an adversary and make it basically give the blue team, the defense team, a run for their money and see if they can sneak around and do stuff without being detected by simulating an advanced persistent threat. So by doing that, you're auditing and you're doing all those highly specific things, and you can also get in tons of trouble. So for example, if you are running Metasploit, like first of all, you've got to have targets. So if you have if you can spin up a vulnerable target and then attack it with Metasploit, you're golden. Like that's totally fine. But for people who aren't doing that, let's say you're on your school network or your work network or whatever, and you're running Metasploit, as one does, but shouldn't do, you will almost definitely get in trouble. You basically look 100% like an adversary, and if that is not your job to be doing that, then you could get into a lot of trouble for doing something suspicious like that. So it's like, are some tools in Kali Linux illegal to run? Yeah, totally. Like if you are just running like like a jamming attack or like other things that are totally capable of being done out of the box, like you could definitely get in trouble for running some of these programs. So I would say that of the illegal programs in Kali Linux, Metasploit is high tier in terms of the attention that it could get you, because again, it's designed to simulate red teaming. It's designed to simulate like adversary stuff. So if you're using it, it will attract attention unless you're using it in exactly the right way. So I think that's why a lot of people don't use Metasploit, or why it doesn't maybe apply to their job, is like we learn to use it, we learn what it's like, we learn what it's for, and then unless we're specifically involved in red teaming, like, or we're like pen testing our own network or something, like, or doing, I don't know, like a CTF, I don't really find a lot of reasons to use Metasploit, whereas I still find myself using Wireshark and other tools fairly frequently. So I think that would be why, is just like it's a very limited in scope tool. It's excellent at what it does, and it's really good to learn. I think that most people should learn how to run like basic exploits with Metasploit. It's not that complicated. And all the concepts of like the attackers, like kill chain, like whatever, are all kind of integrated into it. And you learn about the phases of an infection, of actually like infecting a device, of spreading on the network, of escalating, like all that stuff is included in Metasploit, and it teaches you how to do that. So I'm not speaking poorly about Metasploit in any way, shape, or form. I just think that it is pretty highly specific to a couple people's jobs. And once other people train with it, it's like you just don't really find a reason to use it super often, at least for me anyway. This is a great question. Do you know any article or GitHub repos that show a simulation of a client and Wi-Fi router connecting process? So this is something that I really wanted to do on my very first C3 conference. This was in 2019. So I was talking to my then friend Stefan, who goes by Space Hoon, about some of the workshops we'd been working on, where we had two wireless devices, one of which was creating a Wi-Fi network, and the second of which was joining it. And this is fine. It's basically, you're not faking anything. You're just having two real Wi-Fi devices interacting and creating Wi-Fi handshakes. And we were using that to teach people how to do like Wi-Fi hacking techniques. And we were, I had done this for Verona's, like we went to C3 and I was like using it to kind of teach people about Wi-Fi hacking and doing like a lightning round of password cracking. And it was fun. But I was just like, if we can send arbitrary packets from this device, like why can't we just record a Wi-Fi conversation between a client and an access point and then just play it back, right? Just play the same packets back and make it so we can simulate handshakes, or we can simulate conversations between multiple devices, but from a single wireless radio. So I actually was able to convince them to work with me on it. I recorded some traffic, I sent it to them, they played it back, like we went back and forth, and like we got it to the point that it was actually working. And I have this in my GitHub. I will drop it in the stream because it is definitely worth checking out. But having a single device that just plays back the same Wi-Fi handshake over and over and over allows you to isolate it in Wireshark. It allows you to guarantee that there's going to be a handshake that you can crack if you're using one of these Wi-Fi hacking tools. And I think it's nice to be able to just confirm that, yes, it is working. I am able to use a password list to grab the handshake, and all I need is like a $1.80 microcontroller, which is any ESP8266 based microcontroller. So it could be a D1 Mini, it could be a Node MCU. Either way, you can flash this Arduino code and then just have it so that it is creating handshakes nonstop. Now, the downside to this is once you just capture the traffic, like I said, this is a hashed version of the password, right? So that means if I want to change it, that all has to be calculated all over again. And as far as I've been able to find, there was no really good function for calculating simulated Wi-Fi handshakes on the fly in Arduino or CircuitPython. So as a result, this conversation has to be pre-recorded. Basically, we record like a real conversation, we extract the information necessary from Wireshark, and then we take those packets and we cram them into a compiled version of the code, and then we just play that back. So changing the password is a pain. It's annoying. You have to basically do it in real life, record it, and then compile it, and then stick it on the microcontroller. So unlike having two devices, which you can just tell both of them to change the Wi-Fi network name and password, and boom, you've got a totally different setup ready to go. This one only is able to offer up a single Wi-Fi handshake, or basically using a single password. So that's the drawback between using a single device to simulate like multiple Wi-Fi handshakes or multiple devices all connecting to a wireless network. Really, really cool to do that so cheaply, and also a super ethical way of being able to teach people Wi-Fi password cracking. So let's say that you're at a school or you're at somewhere that's going to be very upset with you if you are kicking devices off of networks, or using deauthentication attacks, or doing like, Wi-Fi attacks that are offensive. This allows you to use a single device to let everybody see and capture that handshake, and then they like extract it. And I think that the capturing process is like part of the magic, being able to like grab it out of the air and then like crack that password is really exciting and cool. So anyway, that's a very long answer to say that if you want to be able to like capture this in Wireshark and basically have a repeatable wireless handshake that I myself recorded that I know works, I will drop the GitHub repo and it works off of a microcontroller, a single microcontroller, which I think is super cool. You can also, again, combine two microcontrollers. You just connect them over like software serial, and they're able to exchange the information to constantly generate new Wi-Fi handshakes. Still very, very useful. And again, could be the difference between being able to teach some of these very cool Wi-Fi hacking classes and getting told like, no, it's too spicy. Like we don't want to do it. All right. Reading through more questions. All right. We want to set the price to very, very low for the gas. I feel like where I live, the gas is already so cheap that I would barely notice. I'm about to be shocked by the price being literally double in Los Angeles when I arrive at like midnight tonight. I've explored manipulating the TV attached to gas pumps. The particular ones I was prodding at transmit the data by radio. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the entertainment centers that are built into gas pumps actually do seem like a way that you could potentially mess with it. Having strange messages played over them, being able to introduce scams to the gas station radio, like wireless screens that like are fed by radio would probably be the peak of this. I think like if people were falling for crypto scams that they were seeing from hacked like gas station screen displays, like I think that would be probably the worst outcome of the rapid, I guess like technological upgrade of gas stations that's causing these screens to just be like everywhere. So yeah, I guess I never thought of that. Like displaying like malicious ads or scam ads on gas station screens like could actually be like the new frontier of techno criminals attempting to trick people at gas stations. All right. So, oh yeah, and then also addressing this. Yes, if you wanted to create simulated network traffic on a device that has like Python on it, unfortunately, I don't think that Scapy is available on microcontrollers. So you're kind of stuck using something like a Raspberry Pi or like a full computer rather than a microcontroller. But yeah, I mean, overall, it's relatively easy to create network traffic with something like Scapy. I just have not done so myself. I think with ChatGPT being out there, like creating simple Scapy code to make like a PCAP file that has a handshake in it probably would not be that difficult. So I think that there are a couple ways of making that happen. I've tried it myself, actually, and I found that it did not work when I tried to do it on a microcontroller. I did not try it on a Raspberry Pi, so probably with full Python behind it, it would be easier to do so. I just find that like generating a PCAP file is less exciting than grabbing the password out of the air when available. All right. I hate this. The original free gas scam was getting mailbox number stickers from Home Depot and putting one over one pump when you're actually parked at the real pump. Pulling a switcheroo on what pump people put money on and then just absorbing all the free gas and then just getting away with it is absolutely a scumbag move, but I have to admire how crafty that is. All right, so I wanted to touch on a couple of the questions we got on the YouTube channel. I feel like we get so many. Sometimes I forget to go to them. So one question was just on the frequency of data breaches. So I know doing the news stream, I kind of feel like there are more scams than usual, or like there's more of these really big breaches than usual. And honestly, I just feel like that's like a trend. Like we have so many different systems that are being connected or brought online that didn't used to be, that they have just become a value add for criminals, where like if you want to make some money off of some poorly secured stuff, whether it's the people whose data is in the database or the company who is attempting to secure the database, this is the way to do it nowadays. Like it really doesn't take that much effort to find like an initial access broker who has already broken into the system, and then to find like ransomware you can basically pay to use that handles the entire process of exploiting and then ransoming a victim. So for people who just have money that aren't afraid to throw it into the cybercrime ring, like it means that there's a marketplace already out there where it basically requires very little skill and only some startup money to start a cybercrime business. And they tend to be very profitable. So that I think is one of the reasons behind why there are so many breaches and why there are so many really big events in cybersecurity, especially like this year. I just feel like it's going to be a continuing trend where the more stuff is out there for cyber criminals to get into, and the more people are able to make off of just breaching like random things that are left poorly secured, the more we're going to be hearing about these breaches and the more we're going to be talking about them in the news stream. All right, so next question, and this wasn't really a question, this was more a reflection, and I agree with it personally, was talking about some of my experience with teaching journalists. So little bit of a long one here, but the idea is that they like the fact that I was trying to teach people who generally aren't bothering anyone, but still like have to do their work out in the open. So like unlike some of the other requests that I get for teaching investigation tactics, like police officers and stuff like that, a lot of these journalists like have to put their name on the stuff that they publish. They don't get to put anyone away. They might be able to call out like the rich and powerful, but at the same time, they're left very vulnerable. And sometimes these people are the subject of very intense attempts to get into their stuff, like attempts to see what they're digging into. And especially if they make any enemies, these are the people that some of these really high level cyber weapons are used against. That's going to be like Pegasus and some of the other things that like have been found to infect the devices of influential or particularly vulnerable people worldwide. Journalists are the ones who are kind of at the forefront of this sort of hacking. So I've been fortunate enough to work with the Norwegian Institute of Journalism to not only introduce journalists to hackers and kind of like get those connections going, but also teach them about security. I remember being horrified by some of the questions that some of the journalists were asking, like, hey, if I went to Russia and they took my laptop and they separated me from it for like 30 minutes and then gave it back to me, like, is it cool to like bring it back home and like keep working with it? And I was like, no, like you should absolutely wipe that computer, or maybe even just not even use it at this point. Like if Russia identified you at the border as a journalist, took away your laptop, and then gave it back to you after 30 minutes, like you should not trust that computer anymore. It's been like that's you've lost physical control of it. It's not good. So yeah, it was pretty shocking to me, some of the questions that the journalists were asking me, just because I never considered putting myself in their shoes and understanding exactly what it's like to take on a job where you have so much exposure and potentially you're making some very rich and powerful people very mad. And if they have the money and if they're angry enough, there's some of these really powerful cyber weapons that could be levied against you. Or again, you could just have your computer taken away when you're on assignment and get it back later and just not know what's going on with it, or like whether or not you should trust it again. So wild. One of my favorite assignments, not only because I got to go to Norway and I got to go to one of my favorite hacker spaces, which is Hackerjet, I also got to meet a lot of really incredible people working in Norway, covering a lot of like incredible stuff, like some shady billionaires like moving their money around in sketchy ways, and then some other like organized crime and like far right like terrorism stuff that they were working on. Like, it was heavy. Like, so being able to work with people who are like really like documenting stuff that made a difference in society was super rewarding. And I have to say, like, of all the jobs I've had, getting to teach journalists about cybersecurity, ethical hacking, and then also just their own personal security and make connections in the hacker community, like that was like amazing. And I would love to do it again if you're out there listening. All right. All right, here's a question. Should I allow comparison to hinder me from mastering hacking? You may need to restate that question just so I can fully answer it. All right, here's a demand. License key of Maltego can be provided. I think this is actually a question. I actually have not worked with Maltego for a while, and I really want to. They've gone through so many transformations. I'm gonna be honest, you guys. Like, I don't have a stake in the company. Like, I just really liked them when I was getting started with Kali Linux, and I thought they were like amazing and cool, and like really scratched that itch for like scrounging up data. Maltego. All right. So if you're not familiar with Maltego, it's one of the things I actually got that teaching journalism job teaching about. Maltego is a kind of like graph-based system for digging up digital clues that uses what are called transforms. And they're basically a combination of like an algorithm and an API that reaches out and takes like a single clue or a pivot point in an investigation and reaches out on the internet and uses these APIs to bring in more clues or more data. So for an investigator, let's say that I'm investigating you because you did something bad, okay? And all I know is your screen name. I could take your screen name that you're using to post these hateful comments and like run it through a bunch of these transforms and see if you ever used that screen name anywhere else on the internet before. And then if you do, I'm able to extract your profile contents and find information that maybe you used when you signed up that would allow me to find other profiles you created under a different screen name. And then that screen name I could pivot off of and then find with that new screen name other profiles you created that has more information about you. And eventually that process of like pivoting and getting a new pivot point and more information is able to actually drill down a lot. And I can get social media profiles, specific posts, I can analyze sentiment, I can see how you feel about certain things. It's really a pretty incredible program. Downsides. So the downside of Maltego is there's always more data, and you can always just right mouse click and have it just go crazy on importing stuff, and it will find things that are completely irrelevant, right? Like it's the same kind of concept where if you just do a very general Google search and it generates 1 million results, that doesn't mean you have 1 million hits. It just means your search sucked. Most of the time, you're looking for a single result. So if you know how to use it properly, it can be an incredible tool. But as I frequently find when teaching investigation techniques, it also tends to attract people who have paranoid schizophrenia or other sorts of mental conditions going on where all of this information and all these clues are very tantalizing. And even if they are clearly not really connected, all that information kind of flooding in and seeing it appear on the graph, it scratches an itch. And as a result, when I teach these investigation classes, get like a really weird mix of like federal law enforcement, journalists, and then people with paranoid schizophrenia. So it's a very strange topic to teach. And as a result, like I've kind of gone back and forth on like teaching too much of it. But when I was at when I was at my first C3 conference, the staff at Maltego, who at the time was based very, very close, took me out for food and like, talked about the product, and I got to visit their office, and like, it was pretty cool. So of all the like vendors out there, I've had a pretty wild ride with Maltego, and then they got bought like twice or maybe just once, I don't know. But now it was like a German company owned them, and then now I think like an American company owns them. It's totally not clear who owns the company anymore. And that's why I kind of like took a little bit of a step back. As much as I love Maltego, when I was talking to them, it was based in South Africa. Like it's bounced around the world so many times that I barely know like what's going on anymore. But if you are curious about investigations, if you want to try out a really interesting tool, I do still recommend Maltego. I think it's pretty powerful and pretty cool. But at the same time, I will say I have no idea who owns it anymore. And back in the day when I knew everyone who worked at Maltego and I hung out like in their office, there was some crazy stuff still going on. So I'll give an example. I like hacker story time. So when you're in Maltego, there's all these different transforms you can do, right? And there's different providers of transforms who submit their stuff. And there was one provider who was a Russian provider, and I'm not saying anything. I just think it's interesting that it was like somebody who was attempting to offer all these really useful free transforms that were usually paid transforms. But in order to use them, you had to send all of your searches to Russia. So imagine I'm a journalist, right? I'm doing research on like a Russian oligarch or something, or like a billionaire, and I am using Maltego. I have all these options that are paid, but then there's this one company that is a Russian company, and maybe they're not super transparent about that, like when you just originally look them up, where I can do all the same searches that I usually have to pay for, but they're offering a free version. So suddenly I'm very incentivized to send all of my searches through this transform provider that is based in Russia, where all of my like sensitive journalistic investigation searches, and maybe like in another scenario, I'm a police officer that's also using these for free. Maybe I'm sending the subjects of my investigation directly to Russia. And I was just like, I was talking with the developers at Maltego. I was just like, do you guys think that's a problem? Like, are they weird? Because they reached out to me, and I got some red flags about it. I was like, I don't really, you guys seem cool, but like I don't know if I want to work with you. Like something about it feels off. So as a result, like I was just talking with him, I was like, hey, did this company reach out to you? Because I got a weird vibe off of them. And like I was just thinking about how their stuff works. And it's just so weird that when you try to use one of the paid tools, their free thing pops up. And like I feel like most people just use that. And they're like, yeah, we kind of hadn't thought of that. So like we talked, and like, you know, further on they were just like, yeah, we're gonna do some security things and like make it so that like, you know, they're not able to see the contents of the traffic. And I was just like, do you think they're still going to want to provide these free services if they can't see the traffic? Like, I kind of think that's like the whole point. I think this might be an information gathering thing where, like, you know, if you're using a transform in the system, you might not understand where the search is actually going. So anyway, that was for me the craziest conversation I had, like with the people at Multigo. They took steps to kind of address this, and I think that in the future they worked it out. But I've had all sorts of drama actually now that I think of it, which is funny because I love that tool. Like I said, it's very popular. It's one of the most popular tools in Kali Linux, and I've taught about it a lot. But I also had a tool where the Multigo people, bless them, they're amazing. They're super kind. They invited me on some of their webinars, and like one of their webinar was like from a provider that was using stolen data, where they were basically buying data, like a totally unvalidatable data off of the dark web with money. And then using that data to sell it to law enforcement agencies to get around the need to like use a warrant. So basically their whole pitch was just like, this is how we could have like caught XYZ guy by like, you know, getting one of their passwords and comparing it against all these data breaches that we paid for. We reclaimed the data and then identifying other accounts that he used the same password in. That to me is crazy because not only could like, you know, whoever stole the data in the first place just add, delete, modify stuff, but like representing it to people who are performing investigations, like it's like information that could be believed, like blows my mind. Like I'm not going to name names. I'm just saying like the market around investigation tools and online investigations is crazy to me. It's like it's almost separate from the rest of like ethical hacking, where like we have our like Metasploit that's very much about, you know, like red teaming and just like learning how to breach stuff. And then we have investigation tools where the overlap is like hackers doing OSINT on a company they're going to attack. So it's part of red teaming, but then also like private investigators, like federal investigators, like criminal investigators, like researchers, and then journalists, and then yeah, just like all kinds. So the cat and mouse game around these tools, like the things that I have learned while trying to teach them to journalists, and the things I've had to warn them about, like, hey, maybe if you're investigating a Russian, like don't use these extensions because it might send your entire investigation directly to them. That was pretty crazy to me. So know where your data goes. Multigo is a great tool. Again, I have no idea who owns them at the moment. Like they haven't taken me out to dinner in a couple of years, so I don't know who's over there anymore. But I did get a lot of value out of that tool. Just understand there's a lot of false positives, and you do need to kind of know what you're doing with it to avoid getting overwhelmed by all the stuff going on. So that was a lot about Multigo, but I did want to answer that question because that used to be my bread and butter, teaching Multigo. It was one of my favorite investigation tools because some of the stuff, like I'm not going to lie, was pretty mind-blowing. Like they were able to do live conversation tracking on Twitter. So you could like have a graph that was constantly updating with like what people were saying about a topic, and then also a sentiment analysis in real time, like basically showing the conversation about a specific topic evolving as it was coming in live. So like if you had a breaking piece of news and you wanted to like see all the people that were tweeting about it and like how those people were connected, you could actually detect botnets and like groups of like fake commenters and stuff like that, all spreading the same messages with the same hashtags and stuff, and you could see them like becoming a big part of the conversation, growing in real time. So for like tracking like real time injection of like misinformation and propaganda, like it used to absolutely slay at that. It was amazing. It was so cool. And then they kind of removed that functionality, and there were other things it could and couldn't do. So there's a lot there. Like you can use it super creatively, and I'm not sure where that company is now, but hopefully in a good place because I really appreciate Multigo. All right. Please don't put your Samsung device in the microwave. Yes. Apple's connected with the NSA. Yeah. We are probably going to do a lot of silly NSA branding at C3. So you can look forward to the Nugget Service Agency, our version of the NSA. over there. Okay, all right. I think we're almost through all the time that we have. I also wanted to give a shout out. I know we haven't been doing as many of our cloud security things, partially because I've been out and partially because they are subject to failure fairly often when I try to do them. But I just wanted to shout out Burp Suite as, again, a tool that anybody who wants to get started with cloud security is definitely going to want to check out. I've talked about Wireshark, Montego, and other things, but I feel like I would definitely want to also shout out Burp Suite. Let me share my screen again, just as a way of trying out some of these like cloud security hacking things that we've been talking about for the first time. The lab that I want to do this time is so easy. I feel like we could do it relatively quickly. So unprotected admin functionality. A lot of the time when setting up cloud environments, like, we have a certain responsibility up to a certain point to like either select a cloud image or whatever, but also to configure it properly and make sure that nothing is exposed that shouldn't be. So there's a couple different labs here that are talking about admin functionality. And this is something that's baked into a lot of different applications that might be running in a cloud environment. So being able to access an unprotected admin functionality is something that I have personally done many times on Wi-Fi routers. So my experience with this is typically in like edge devices like routers where we've got, maybe a very, very old web interface running. And that's a lot of the time where you'll find these, but also applications that are not set up properly are going to be a source of this sort of confusion. So in this lab, if I access it, which I'm going to copy the address first, the goal here is for me to actually go in and delete a user. And what I'm using here is Portswigger's, what did they call it? Web Academy, whatever Academy? Yes, their Academy. So, Portswigger Academy, there you go. All right, so Portswigger Academy, I brought this up before, and we've done a couple demos on here as well, but I really just think it's cool to have access to a real live attackable web application that is something that, you are completely able to attack without any sort of consequence. Yes, this is their web stores are always so ridiculous. Like, I have to say, I do admire the fact that they have been able to make this consistently funny. So in Burp Suite, if I want to target this, let's see. I actually haven't used Burp Suite for a minute, and it's been updated. There's so much. Wow, they really want me to upgrade. So anyway, if I want to be able to do this, I can open up a browser that is going to proxy everything I'm doing. The idea here is Burp Suite is going to get in the middle. Oh, yes. Of the conversation and allow me to then filter everything that goes through and explore for, potentially vulnerable settings or maybe like a packet communication that I could replay or modify in order to get where I want to go on the network. So, all right, here I have this going through. Intercept is now on. And we've got a ping. So let me refresh this. And we should then see the complete process of this connecting. Hopefully. Oh, yes. So the other thing is I have to forward these packets now since I've chosen to intercept. That allows me to see each one as they go through. And then let's see. All right, so we've got a bunch of different packets that have gone through. And again, this is all very, very basic. We're just kind of going through and having website load through Burp Suite and giving us all the packets that were necessary to make that happen. So, all right, so we know that there's an admin functionality embedded here that we have access to. And that means we can, if we root around enough, find portions of this that will give us clues about where we could go. So here, let's see, we have the refer. And basically, like, what this is supposed to teach you to do is start to dig around in here. And when you have a web application you suspect might be vulnerable, start to look into places that might be vulnerable. So I actually haven't used the like spidering function of Burp Suite in a very long time. But basically, some of the things you can do is start to search this domain and try to find other URLs or other things that are available. Let's see. Yes, let's add that to scope. Great. Yes, exactly. Okay. So if I want to then like kind of go through and search, oh, I can see engagement tools are pro only. That's why I'm attempting to also like limit this to tools that everybody has access to. The pro version has so many things that are able to kind of expand on this. But basically, I would want to spider this. I'm so used to OWASP Zap that like doing live demos is tricky. Now let's see. Touch decoder logger extensions learn. Let's see. Oh, here we go. All right. So this is like kind of a list of like all the different resources that were found. We have shop.svg, we've got JavaScript. And what I'm interested in is, at least in this one, most websites have a robot.txt. Whoa. That is the source of kind of a map of all these files and like, you know, where you would go. And also like what you are and are not allowed to open. So typically, if we're able to start kind of digging around inside the files that were loaded, everything that was kind of like discovered when you are loading the website, you can find like the robot.txt file. Let's see. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, right. And I'm still intercepting. All right, so that should, oops. All right, so I should have allowed that traffic to go through. And okay, there we go, robots.txt. All right, let's see the response. Okay, cool. All right. So it worked. There is an automated way of doing this. I wish I could tell you. I could tell you in OWASP Zap, or sorry, just Zap, which I typically use, but I'm trying to use Burp Suite more often. So anyway, we can see here that it successfully loaded. This is the robots.txt that is basically saying, okay, this is what you are not allowed to access. And in this case, we can see that it's supposed to disallow access to /administrator panel. So if somebody was trying to prevent certain parts of their website from being indexed and they wanted to exclude, for example, their administrator panel, then they could set the robots.txt to this. And we could, as a hacker, start probing around and basically send a request to the robots.txt and then examine the response to see, okay, is there anything in here that allows us to identify like a sensitive and potentially unprotected part of the web application that, you know, they don't want us to access. So, all right, I'm going to go over here. We're going to go from robots.txt to this newly discovered URL /administrator panel. I think I only need one slash. And it instantly crashed. Is this real? Okay. All right. Okay, let's try this. All right, so here we're able to get, we can see we have a login panel. I'm going to try again. And see if I can do this. Instead of login, let's do /administrator panel. There we go. Okay, I don't know why the one through Burp Suite just crashed instantly, but you can see we have two different users here. Carlos is the one that we have been assigned to delete from the database. So let's go ahead and do that. There you go. I solved the lab. Okay, admittedly, that was a pretty easy one, but I wanted to throw that in at the end because we haven't done some of these cloud security things, and some of them honestly are pretty easy. They're just a matter of scraping around on the web application and seeing if some of these common targets like the robots.txt contain juicy information. So that is my weekly example of cloud security basics. In this case, just looking for unprotected administrator functions by looking into the robot.txt file. But we didn't need to use any of the fancy paid functionality to like spider or index this stuff. Although I suspect that probably would have made it go faster. Instead, we were able to just, directly request this URL, the robots.txt, examine the response, and then play around with attempting to load it to see if we could get access to something juicy. All right, so that is all the time we have today. I sincerely hope that all the speculation about gas pump hacking is remains speculative, as I will be dependent on gas just as everyone else is over the holidays. So hopefully hackers don't get any ideas from this stream. And I think that because it is Black Friday, we'll not be doing the news stream this week. We'll be doing the Q&A again next week. That'll be the next stream. But if you want to support the stream, make sure to go to varonis.com/Kody. That's Kody. Lets everyone here know that you appreciate the stream. You want us to keep going. And we're nearly at 60,000 subscribers. So thank you to everyone who has joined. And hopefully I run into some of you both at the meetup I'm planning, Null Space Labs in Los Angeles this weekend on Sunday, and also at the C3 conference in Hamburg this year. All right, everyone, I will talk to you on Wednesday. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving to everybody in the US, and to everybody else, enjoy a weekend. Hopefully the gas pumps are safe and you all have a great time. Goodbye, everyone.